Keith cleared his throat. "Eleanor, we're just concerned that you might not be tracking your expenses as carefully as you should. At your age, it's easy to lose track." At your age? Those 3 words landed like stones in my stomach. "I assure." "You both. I'm managing just fine," I replied, my tone perhaps a bit sharper than intended. Thomas joined the conversation then, his expression concerned but diplomatic. "Mom, what Keith means is that financial management gets more complex as we get older. There are new scams targeting seniors every day. We just want to make sure you're protected." I looked at my children's faces, all wearing identical expressions of patronizing concern, and something inside me shifted. These were the same children I had taught to balance checkbooks, save allowance money, and understand the value of a dollar. Thomas had come to me for advice on his first 401k contributions. Jennifer had asked me to review her mortgage options when they bought their house. Yet, somehow, the moment I'd crossed the magical threshold into my senior years, they'd decided I was incapable of managing the money I'd carefully stewarded for decades. "I appreciate your concern," I said finally, folding the dish towel with deliberate precision. "But my finances are my business." The conversation ended there, but the tension lingered throughout the evening. As they were leaving, Jennifer pressed a business card into my hand. "Mom, this is our financial advisor, Greg Winters. He specializes in retirement planning and elder care. Just promise me you'll call him." I took the card without commenting, kissed my grandchildren goodbye, and closed the door behind them. Standing alone in my entryway, surrounded by the remnants of Christmas cheer, I felt a curious mixture of anger and determination taking root. The next morning, I called my own financial advisor, Sophia Patel, a sharp woman in her 40s whom I'd been working with for years. "They think I'm too old to manage my own money," I told her, still fuming as I recounted the previous night's conversation. Sophia chuckled. "Eleanor, your portfolio outperforms most of my clients who are half your age. You're one of the most financially literate people I know." "Tell that to my children," I sighed. "They've already decided I'm one step away from giving my life savings to a Nigerian prince." I could almost hear Sophia's thoughtful nod through the phone. "You know, I've seen this before. Adult children get nervous about their parents' money, partly out of genuine concern, but often because they're starting to think about their inheritance." The word inheritance made me pause. I'd never thought of my children as greedy or entitled. But was that what this was about? Were they worried I'd squander what they saw as their future windfall? "So, what do I do?" I asked. "I've worked hard to be financially independent. I don't want to hand over control of my money just to make them feel better." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You know, Eleanor," Sophia said slowly, "sometimes people need to learn the hard way what they've got before they truly appreciate it." As she outlined a rather unconventional idea, I felt a smile spreading across my face. It was slightly mischievous, perhaps a bit petty, but it might just teach my children the lesson they needed to learn. And that's how Operation Financial Incompetence began. In January, I started laying the groundwork. When Thomas called to check in, I casually mentioned that I was considering some new investment opportunities. What kind of investments? My children told me I was too old to manage my money, so I let them think I lost it all until my birthday surprise. The look on my daughter Jennifer's face when I slid the bank statement across the table was almost worth the 6 months of deception. Almost. Her perfectly manicured nails froze mid-air, hovering over her untouched slice of birthday cake as her eyes widened in disbelief. Next to her, my son-in-law Keith nearly choked on his champagne. My son Thomas, always the composed one, simply sat back in his chair, his expression cycling through confusion, shock, and finally, something that looked remarkably like respect. $2 million? Jennifer whispered, her voice cracking. But Mom, you told us you'd lost everything in that investment scam. I smiled, taking a slow sip of my champagne. I believe what I said was that I'd made some poor financial decisions. I never specified what those decisions were. The truth was, the only poor financial decision I'd made was trusting my children to respect me enough to let me manage my own money. But we'll get to that. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Eleanor Mitchell. I'm 67 years old, retired high school English teacher, and a widow of 8 years. After Richard died, I threw myself into managing our finances, something he had always handled during our 42 years of marriage. It wasn't easy at first, learning about investments, tax strategies, and estate planning while still grieving the loss of my husband. But I discovered that I had a natural aptitude for it. Richard had left me comfortably provided for with a sensible portfolio, decent life insurance, and our mortgage-free colonial in Oak Ridge, Connecticut. But through careful research and some smart moves, I had actually grown our nest egg considerably. I never flaunted my financial success. I continued to live modestly in our family home, drove my 10-year-old Volvo, and spent my time volunteering at the local library and tending to my garden. My greatest indulgence was my weekly pottery class at the community center and occasional trips to visit my sister Martha in Florida. My children had their own lives. Jennifer, my eldest at 43, lived just 30 minutes away with her husband Keith and their 2 teenagers. Thomas, 40, had relocated to Boston for his job in software development. They visited on holidays and called regularly, but our lives had naturally drifted into the comfortable distance that often develops between adult children and their parents. Everything changed last Christmas. The whole family had gathered at my house, as was our tradition. I'd prepared Richard's famous prime rib, set the table with my grandmother's china, and decorated the entire house, perhaps going a bit overboard with the twinkle lights this year. After dinner, while the grandchildren were absorbed in their new gadgets, Jennifer pulled me aside to the kitchen. "Mom, Keith and I have been talking," she began, her voice taking on that gentle, concerned tone that immediately put me on edge. "We're worried about your finances." I continued drying the crystal glasses, raising an eyebrow. "My finances? What about them?" "Well?" She hesitated, exchanging a glance with Keith, who had mysteriously appeared in the doorway. "We noticed you've been spending a lot lately. The new roof, that trip to Martha's last month, and now, all these Christmas presents." I set down the glass I was drying, trying not to show my irritation. "The roof was necessary, Jennifer, and the trip to Martha's was planned months ago. As for the presents, I enjoy spoiling my grandchildren. I can afford it," he asked immediately, his voice tense. "Oh, something about cryptocurrency," I said vaguely. "Bitcoin seems to be doing well, doesn't it? My neighbor's son made a fortune." "Mom," Thomas said slowly, as if explaining to a child, "cryptocurrency is extremely volatile. It's not appropriate for someone in your retirement position." I made a non-committal sound. "Maybe you're right, though that nice man from the investment seminar last week seemed to think it was a sure thing." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "What investment seminar?" he finally asked. "The free one at the community center. They served such lovely finger sandwiches," I replied cheerfully. "Don't worry, I haven't signed anything yet." After hanging up, I could practically hear the panicked phone call from Thomas to Jennifer, just as I'd intended. February brought phase 2 of my plan. I invited Jennifer and Keith over for Sunday dinner and left my laptop open on the kitchen counter, the screen deliberately displaying a colorful website promising 500% returns in just 30 days. When Jennifer walked in and spotted it, she nearly dropped the wine bottle she was carrying. "Mom," she said carefully, closing my laptop, "what is this website you were looking at?" I waved dismissively, continuing to stir the pasta sauce. "Oh, just something I was researching." Did you know that there are investment opportunities in overseas markets that the big banks don't want us to know about? The look of horror on Jennifer's face was almost comical. By the time dinner was served, I had mentioned offshore accounts, rare coin investments, and a wonderful young man who had called offering to help me consolidate my debt. All fictional, of course. "Mom," Jennifer said as they were leaving, her voice thick with concern, "I really think you should let us help you with your finances. These investment opportunities you're talking about. They're scams. All of them." I patted her hand. "Oh, honey, you're so skeptical. Sometimes you have to take risks to get ahead." March was when I really ramped things up. I called Thomas in tears, telling him I'd made a terrible mistake. I invested in this company that was developing revolutionary solar technology. I sobbed into the phone. The returns were supposed to be guaranteed, but now they're saying the company has been suspended from trading due to irregularities. "How much did you invest?" Thomas asked, his voice tight. I paused for dramatic effect. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. $50,000. The explosion I expected came right on cue. Thomas was livid, not at me, but at the scammers who had taken advantage of his mother. He insisted on flying in that weekend to help sort things out. When he arrived, I showed him fabricated documents that Sophia had helped me create. Nothing illegal, just convincing-looking investment statements showing a substantial loss. Thomas spent the entire weekend making calls, sending emails, and trying to recover money that had never actually been invested. By April, Jennifer and Keith were calling daily. Thomas had set up weekly video chats to check in on my financial situation. They began to tag-team me, one calling in the morning, one in the evening, both using the same gentle, concerned tone that made my teeth grind. I remember one evening in particular, sitting in my garden with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My phone rang. Jennifer, right on schedule. "Mom, did you pay your utility bill this month?" she asked without even saying hello. I took a deliberate sip of my Cabernet. "Yes, dear. I've been paying my utility bills for 45 years without your help." "I'm just checking," she said defensively. "Thomas mentioned you seemed confused about your bank statement when he called yesterday." I had, in fact, deliberately acted confused during Thomas's call, claiming I couldn't understand why my balance seemed lower than expected. A perfect setup for my next move. "Well, there have been some unexpected expenses," I admitted, injecting a note of uncertainty into my voice. "What expenses?" Jennifer pounced immediately. "Mom, we talked about this. No major purchases without discussing them with us first." The way she said "us," like she and Thomas formed some parental oversight committee, made my blood simmer. I was a grown woman who had raised them, for heaven's sake, not some wayward teenager. "It wasn't a purchase," I said, letting my voice tremble slightly. "I lent some money to a friend." "You what?" The volume of Jennifer's voice forced me to hold the phone away from my ear. "Who? How much?" "Just an old friend who needed help," I said vaguely. "Gerald, from my pottery class. His daughter is going through a difficult divorce, and they needed help with legal fees." "Gerald?" Jennifer's voice rose even higher. "The man you've mentioned who's always complimenting your work? Mom, he's clearly taking advantage of you." I had, in fact, invented Gerald entirely. There was no man in my pottery class by that name, complimentary or otherwise. But my children had so readily accepted the narrative of their mother as a gullible old woman that they never questioned his existence. "He promised to pay me back," I said defensively. "He's a good man in a difficult situation." Jennifer's exasperated sigh carried clearly through the phone. "How much did you give him, Mom?" I named a sum that I knew would alarm her without seeming completely catastrophic. $20,000? Are you kidding me? Mom, that's... I'm calling Thomas right now. We need to talk about this. After we hung up, I smiled to myself and took another sip of wine. Phase 3 of Operation Financial Incompetence was proceeding exactly as planned. The next day, as expected, I received a conference call from both my children. They had clearly been discussing the Gerald situation extensively. "Mom," Thomas began in his measured, reasonable tone that I knew meant he was anything but calm. "We're very concerned about this loan you've made. It's not just the money," Jennifer added quickly. "It's that you made such a significant financial decision without consulting us." I let them lecture me for a good 15 minutes about financial responsibility, elder scams, and the importance of family consultation. I made appropriate noises of contrition and agreement. "You're right," I said finally, injecting a note of shame into my voice. "I shouldn't have done it. He seemed so desperate, and I wanted to help." "That's what these scammers count on, Mom," Thomas explained patiently. "They prey on people's good nature, especially seniors." There it was again, that reflexive assumption that my age had somehow robbed me of discernment. "I feel so foolish," I said, not having to fake the emotion in my voice, though for entirely different reasons than they assumed. "It's okay, Mom," Jennifer said soothingly. "We're going to help you get through this, but I think it's time we had a more serious conversation about your finances." And that was how, the following weekend, I found myself sitting at my own dining room table while my children essentially audited my financial life. They insisted on seeing bank statements, investment accounts, insurance policies, everything. Of course, I only showed them the accounts I had prepared for this charade with Sophia's help. "Mom," Thomas said gravely after reviewing the documents spread before him, "I'm concerned about what I'm seeing here. Your savings have diminished significantly over the past few months." I nodded meekly. "I know. It's been a difficult time. These investment losses," Jennifer pointed to a statement showing a substantial decline in a fictional retirement account. "These are devastating. And now this loan to Gerald." She practically spat the name. "You're in serious financial trouble." I wrung my hands in what I hoped was a convincing display of distress. What am I going to do? The look that passed between my children was exactly what I had been waiting for. Equal parts concern and calculation. "We think it's time for more drastic measures," Thomas said carefully. "We want to set up a financial conservatorship." Even though I had anticipated this was where things were heading, the actual word, conservatorship, hit me like a physical blow. They wanted legal control over my finances, as if I were incapable of managing my own affairs. "Is that really necessary?" I asked, letting genuine emotion creep into my voice. "Mom, we're trying to protect you," Jennifer insisted. "You've made some really poor decisions lately. We need to make sure you're secure for the future." "For our peace of mind," Thomas added diplomatically. "For their peace of mind, not for mine." "I need some time to think about this," I said, standing up abruptly. "This is all happening very fast." "Of course," Thomas said, exchanging another look with Jennifer. "Take some time. But Mom, please don't make any more financial decisions without talking to us first." I promised I wouldn't, and they left shortly after, clearly satisfied that they had made progress in their mission to save their mother from herself. As soon as they were gone, I called Sophia. "They want a conservatorship," I told her, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Sophia was silent for a moment. "That's further than I expected them to go," she admitted. "Are you sure you want to continue with this, Eleanor? Things could get legally complicated." I thought about the patronizing tone in Thomas's voice, the way Jennifer had practically taken my checkbook out of my hands, the assumption that I needed to be managed rather than respected. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "It's time for Phase 4. May arrived, bringing with it warm breezes and the blooming of my prized rose garden. It also brought the most dramatic phase of my plan. I called both my children in tears, telling them I'd received a foreclosure notice on my house due to missed mortgage payments. "But that's impossible," Jennifer gasped. "The house is paid off." "I had to take out a new mortgage last year," I invented wildly. "The property taxes went up so much, and then there was the roof, and my car needed repairs." The panic was immediate. Jennifer and Keith drove over that same afternoon. Thomas arrived the next day, having taken emergency leave from work. They gathered around my dining table, faces grim, as I produced a fake foreclosure notice. Again, courtesy of Sophia, who was enjoying this charade perhaps a bit too much. "Mom, why didn't you tell us things had gotten this bad?" Jennifer asked, her voice cracking. I looked down at my hands, playing the part of the embarrassed elderly parent perfectly. "I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could handle it." Thomas rubbed his temples. "How much do you owe on the house now?" I named a figure that made both my children blanch. "And what about your other investments?" Keith asked. "Your retirement accounts?" I sighed heavily. "I've had to withdraw from most of them. There were penalties, of course, but I needed the money." The looks they exchanged were exactly what I had been waiting for. The silent communication of adult children realizing their inheritance was evaporating before their eyes. "Okay," Thomas said finally, taking charge. "Here's what we're going to do. Jennifer and I will help you sort this out. But from now on, Mom, no financial decisions without consulting us first. No investments, no major purchases, nothing." Nodded meekly, playing my role to perfection. "If you think that's best." And so began 2 months of the most intensive financial helicopter parenting imaginable. Thomas set up a simplified checking account for me with a debit card that sent him alerts for any purchase over $100. Jennifer insisted on reviewing all my bills before I paid them. Keith created a spreadsheet of my supposed remaining assets and monitored it weekly. What they didn't know was that I spent those 2 months meticulously documenting every interaction, every condescending comment, every assumption they made about my capabilities based solely on my age. "Mom, you don't need new gardening tools," Jennifer said one afternoon, examining my receipt from the local hardware store. "You should be economizing." "Mom, why did you donate to the library fund?" Thomas questioned during one of our weekly financial review calls. "You're in no position to be giving money away." "Eleanor, we noticed you bought tickets to that community theater production," Keith reported, examining my bank statement like a disapproving accountant. "Are these kinds of luxuries really necessary right now?" Each comment, each questioning of my judgment, each infantilizing directive went into my journal, not out of bitterness, but as evidence for the reckoning I knew was coming. The foreclosure situation resolved itself when I tearfully informed them that an old friend had loaned me enough money to get current on the payments. They were relieved, but still insisted on maintaining their oversight of my finances. "Who is this friend?" Thomas demanded. "We need to make sure the loan agreement is fair." "It's Martha's brother-in-law," I lied smoothly. "He's known me for years. The terms are very generous." They seemed skeptical, but accepted the explanation when I produced a fake loan document. Sophia was becoming quite the forger. Through it all, my actual finances remained perfectly intact, safely managed by Sophia, who called our monthly check-ins the most entertaining client meetings of her career. You should have seen Thomas's face when I told him about the reverse mortgage scam I'd nearly fallen for, I told her during one of our meetings. "I thought he was going to have a stroke." Sophia laughed, but then her expression grew more serious. "Eleanor, when are you planning to end this? They're talking about legal control of your finances now. That's no small thing," I sighed, looking out at the summer flowers blooming in the garden beyond her office window. "Soon," I promised. "I think they've learned about as much as they're going to learn from this experience." As my birthday in July approached, I decided it was time for the grand finale. I suggested a small celebration at La Terrazza, an upscale Italian restaurant in town. "Mom, are you sure that's in your budget?" Jennifer asked carefully. "We could do something at home instead." "It's my birthday," I replied, allowing a hint of stubbornness to creep into my voice. "And I want to treat my family to a nice dinner." They reluctantly agreed, though I overheard Jennifer telling Keith they would need to be prepared to cover the bill when I inevitably couldn't afford it. The week before my birthday, I met with Sophia to finalize the details of my plan. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" she asked, looking over the documents I'd prepared. "It's going to be quite a shock for them." I nodded firmly. They need to understand that age doesn't automatically equal incompetence. Besides, I added with a small smile, I think they've tormented me enough with their financial guardianship to deserve a little shock. Sophia laughed. "I can't argue with that. You've been remarkably patient with them." She passed me the final documents. "Everything's in order. Your actual portfolio statements, authentication letters from the bank, and copies of your recent transactions showing your quite impressive investment returns." I looked at the papers that proved what I had known all along, that I was more than capable of managing my own financial affairs. "Thank you, Sophia, for everything." She smiled warmly. "It's been my pleasure, though I will miss our cloak and dagger meetings planning your financial mistakes." The night before my birthday, I could hardly sleep, not from anxiety, but from anticipation. After months of playing the doddering, financially inept elderly mother, I was finally going to reclaim my dignity. The evening of my 68th birthday arrived. La Terrazza had reserved their private dining room for us, as I'd requested when I made the reservation weeks earlier. Jennifer, Keith, and their children arrived first, followed shortly by Thomas, who had flown in for the weekend. Everyone was dressed elegantly, but wore expressions of thinly veiled concern. As we waited to be seated, I overheard Jennifer whispering to Keith, "Remember, when the bill comes, don't make a big deal about it. We'll just cover it quietly." I smiled to myself. Little did they know what was coming. The dinner proceeded beautifully. We enjoyed appetizers, entrees, and wine. I noticed Jennifer wincing slightly when I ordered a second bottle for the table. As dessert was being served, a decadent tiramisu with a single candle for me to blow out, I decided it was time. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," I began, looking around at my family. "This past year has been educational for me." Thomas smiled encouragingly. "We're just glad we could help you get back on track, Mom." I nodded, reaching into my purse to retrieve an envelope. "Yes, about that. I have something for each of you." I handed identical envelopes to both Jennifer and Thomas. They opened them, puzzled, then stared at the bank statements inside. $2 million? Jennifer whispered, her voice cracking. But Mom, you told us you'd lost everything in that investment scam." I smiled, taking a slow sip of my champagne. "I believe what I said was that I'd made some poor financial decisions. I never specified what those decisions were." The stunned silence that followed was deeply satisfying. "I don't understand," Thomas said finally. "These are statements from Morgan Stanley, dated this month, with your name on them." "That's right," I confirmed. "Those represent about half of my actual portfolio. The other half is in a diverse mix of municipal bonds, index funds, and yes, a small but quite profitable position in cryptocurrency that I established 3 years ago." Keith's mouth had fallen open. "But the foreclosure, the failed investments." "All fabricated," I said calmly. "With the help of my financial advisor, Sophia Patel, who I've been working with for the past 5 years. The same Sophia who helped me increase my portfolio by 38% since your father died." The realization dawned on their faces. Gradually, first confusion, then disbelief, and finally, for Thomas at least, a reluctant admiration. "You made it all up?" Jennifer sputtered. "But why would you do that to us? Do you know how worried we've been?" I set down my glass and looked directly at my daughter. "Last Christmas, you and Thomas decided I was too old and incompetent to manage my own money. Rather than asking me about my financial situation or offering to help if I wanted it, you assumed I needed to be managed, controlled, like a child." I kept my voice even, though the memory still stung. "You never once considered that I might know what I was doing." Thomas had the grace to look ashamed. "We were concerned, Mom. There are so many scams targeting seniors." "I'm aware of the scams, Thomas," I interrupted gently. "I've been avoiding them successfully for years. Did it ever occur to either of you to ask me about my financial literacy instead of assuming I had none?" Jennifer's eyes had filled with tears. "We were trying to protect you." "I know you were," I acknowledged. "But in doing so, you robbed me of my agency, my dignity. You treated me as though my age had somehow erased a lifetime of accumulated wisdom and experience." I looked between my two children, softening my tone. "I'm your mother, not a child, in need of supervision. I taught you both how to balance a checkbook, remember? I helped you figure out your first apartment leases, your student loans, your mortgage applications. That knowledge didn't suddenly disappear when I turned 65. The silence that followed was heavy with realization. Jennifer dabbed at her eyes with her napkin while Thomas stared into his wine glass. "So what happens now?" Keith finally asked. I smiled. "Now, we start over, with respect and honest communication. I'm perfectly willing to discuss my finances with you both, as equals. I actually have some estate planning considerations I'd value your input on, but those discussions will happen because I want them to, not because you've decided I'm incapable." Thomas reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, Mom. We should have given you more credit." "We were wrong," Jennifer added quietly. "Really wrong." "Yes, you were," I agreed, but with a smile to soften the words. "But you're forgiven. Consider this a valuable lesson about making assumptions based on someone's age." I signaled to the waiter for the check. When he brought it, I handed over my credit card without hesitation. "My treat," I insisted when Thomas reached for his wallet. "I've been planning for this dinner for months. It's well within my budget." As we walked out of the restaurant together, Jennifer linked her arm through mine. "So, you really have a cryptocurrency investment?" I laughed. "Just a small one. Your father always taught me to diversify, and I like to keep a toe in emerging markets." Thomas shook his head, smiling. "I have to admit, Mom, you played us masterfully. Planning all this for 6 months? That's dedication to the long game." "When you're my age," I replied with a wink, "you learn that patience pays off. In investments and in life lessons." The evening air was warm as we said our goodbyes in the parking lot. There was a new understanding between us, one built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than misplaced concern. As I drove home alone, I felt lighter somehow. The deception had been worth it for the clarity it brought. My children had seen me as vulnerable and in need of protection. Now they saw me as I truly was, capable, independent, and perhaps a bit more crafty than they'd given me credit for. When I arrived home, I found a text message from Sophia. "How did it go?" I smiled as I typed my reply. "Mission accomplished. Though I think they may want to meet you now that they know you exist." Her response came quickly. "Anytime. I love showing off my star client's portfolio. Still up for our meeting next week to discuss that new REIT opportunity?" "Absolutely," I texted back, though I should probably mention it to the kids first. No more secrets. I set my phone down and looked around my living room, the home Richard and I had built together, the life we had planned, and the future I was still actively shaping. At 68, I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. And now my children finally understood that too. What I didn't anticipate, however, was how quickly old patterns could resurface, albeit in subtler forms. 3 weeks after my revelatory birthday dinner, I received an invitation to lunch from Jennifer. She suggested Marigold, an upscale cafe downtown that we both enjoyed. Her text mentioned she had something exciting she wanted to discuss. When I arrived, Jennifer was already seated at a corner table, an unusually thick folder on the table beside her water glass. She stood to greet me with a warm hug, seeming genuinely happy to see me. "You look wonderful, Mom," she said as we settled into our seats. "That blouse is beautiful on you." I thanked her for the compliment, sensing there was more to this lunch than casual conversation. Jennifer had always been transparent in her emotions, a quality she inherited from her father. Today, she radiated a barely contained excitement. "So," I said after we'd ordered, "what's this exciting thing you wanted to discuss?" Jennifer's face lit up as she pulled the folder closer. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since your birthday dinner," she began, her voice animated. "About your investments, your portfolio performance, everything you've accomplished financially." I nodded, pleased that she was acknowledging my capabilities. "And I realized," she continued, "that there's a huge opportunity here for both of us." She opened the folder and turned it toward me. Inside was a glossy brochure featuring a photo of Jennifer in a professional pose, alongside a stylized logo reading Mitchell Family Financial Services. "I don't understand," I said, confusion replacing my initial pleasure. "Mom, your story is incredible," Jennifer gushed. "A widow who takes control of her finances and outperforms the market? And then the twist. Your own children underestimating you because of your age?" She leaned forward, eyes bright with enthusiasm. "It's marketing gold." I stared at her, trying to process what she was proposing. "I've been wanting to branch out from real estate for a while now," she explained. "This is the perfect stepping stone into financial advising. We could be a mother-daughter team. You bring the inspiring story and investment expertise, and I handle the business side, the client acquisition, the marketing." As she continued outlining her vision, I felt a familiar disappointment settling in my chest. Just 3 weeks ago, Jennifer had apologized for treating me like a financial incompetent. Now, rather than truly respecting my capabilities, she was trying to commodify them, to use my story to launch her own business venture. "Jennifer," I interrupted gently, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm not interested in becoming a financial advisor or the face of a family business." Her smile faltered. "But Mom, this could be huge. People would love your story. It's so empowering. And think about all the other seniors you could help." If I wanted to help other seniors with financial literacy, I could do that without launching a business, I pointed out, through community workshops or mentoring programs. Jennifer's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of the old condescension returning. "That's sweet, Mom, but why do it for free when we could build something profitable together? This could be a real legacy." "I already have a legacy," I said firmly, "and it's not for sale." The conversation grew increasingly strained as Jennifer tried different angles to persuade me, each one revealing that she still didn't truly understand what my financial independence meant to me. It wasn't about impressing others or monetizing my knowledge. It was about maintaining my autonomy and dignity. By the time we parted ways outside the cafe, there was a palpable tension between us. Jennifer's parting words, "Just think about it, Mom, that's all I'm asking," carried an undercurrent of disappointment that felt uncomfortably familiar. As I drove home, I reflected on how easily old dynamics could reassert themselves in new guises. Jennifer was no longer trying to take control of my finances away from me. Instead, she was trying to co-opt my financial acumen for her own purposes. Different approach, same fundamental issue. She still wasn't seeing me as a complete person with my own goals and boundaries. I had barely settled at home when my phone rang. It was Thomas. his voice unusually hesitant. "Mom, Jennifer just called?" "Me," he began. "She said you turned down her business proposal and seemed upset." I sighed, unsurprised that Jennifer had immediately enlisted her brother's support. "That's right. I'm not interested in becoming a financial advisor or the face of a family business." "I get that," Thomas said, surprising me. "Actually, I told Jennifer the same thing when she pitched the idea to me last week. It seemed exploitative somehow." I felt a rush of relief that at least one of my children truly understood. "Exactly. I didn't orchestrate that 6-month charade just to turn around and commercialize the experience." "I know," Thomas replied. "But Mom, Jennifer's really disappointed. She saw this as a way to make amends, to show she values your financial knowledge. She's just going about it all wrong." "That's generous of you," I said. "But I think there's still a fundamental misunderstanding here. Jennifer seems to view my financial competence as a resource she can tap into, rather than an aspect of my independence that should be respected." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "You're right," he said. "Finally, we're still learning how to see you correctly. It's going to take more than one dramatic revelation to undo years of unconscious assumptions." His self-awareness was refreshing. "Thank you for understanding, Thomas." "For what it's worth," he added before hanging up, "I think Jennifer will come around. Just give her time to process." The following week brought a new and unexpected complication. I was working in my garden, enjoying the tranquility of the late summer afternoon, when a sleek black sedan pulled into my driveway. A man in his mid-60s emerged, well-dressed in a lightweight linen suit that spoke of both money and taste. He approached with a confident stride, his silver hair catching the sunlight. "Eleanor Mitchell?" he asked, extending his hand. "I'm Victor Reynolds." The name sounded vaguely familiar, though I couldn't immediately place it. "Yes, I'm Eleanor," I confirmed, removing my gardening gloves to shake his hand. "What can I do for you, Mr. Reynolds?" "Victor, please," he insisted with a warm smile. "I believe we have a mutual acquaintance, Sophia Patel." Ah, now I placed him. Sophia had mentioned Victor Reynolds occasionally, a widower who had made his fortune in commercial real estate and was now one of her more significant clients. "Sophia mentioned you might be open to having a conversation," he continued, "about a matter of some mutual interest." I invited him inside, curious about what could have prompted this unexpected visit. Once settled in my living room with glasses of iced tea, Victor came straight to the point. "I understand you recently gave your children quite an education in respecting your financial autonomy," he said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. I raised an eyebrow. "Sophia told you about that?" "Just the broad strokes," he assured me. "Your 6-month charade to teach your children you're perfectly capable of managing your own finances. Brilliant, if I may say so." I wasn't entirely comfortable with my personal family matters being discussed with a stranger, but Victor seemed genuinely appreciative rather than judgmental. "What Sophia might not have mentioned," he continued, "is that I went through something similar with my own children after my wife died. Different approach, same fundamental issue. Adult children assuming that aging parents automatically become financially incompetent." His understanding resonated with me. "It's a common assumption, unfortunately." "Indeed," Victor nodded. "Which brings me to the reason for my visit. I'm part of a group called Financial Autonomy Network, FAN for short. We're seniors who are working to change the narrative around aging and financial capability. We provide education, advocacy, and peer support." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the coffee table to me. The elegant logo featured a stylized fan with the tagline, "Your money, your wisdom, your choices." "We're looking for new board members," he explained. "People who understand firsthand the challenges of maintaining financial independence in a society that often dismisses the capabilities of older adults. Sophia thought you might be interested." I studied the card, intrigued despite my initial reservations. What exactly does FAN do? Victor's face lit up with passion as he outlined the organization's activities. Workshops for seniors on financial literacy and technology, educational, programs for financial professionals about avoiding age-based biases, advocacy work around policies affecting seniors' financial rights, and peer support networks. We're not a large organization, he admitted, but we're growing, and we're looking for board members who bring both financial savvy and personal experience with these issues. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was another opportunity to use my financial story just weeks after I'd refused Jennifer's business proposal. But this felt different. This wasn't about commercializing my experience for personal gain. It was about channeling it toward helping others facing similar challenges. I'd need to know more before making any decisions, I said carefully. About the organization, the commitment involved, and the other board members. Victor smiled approvingly. I'd expect nothing less from someone Sophia speaks so highly of. We're having our monthly board meeting next Thursday evening at the Ridgemont Community Center. Why don't you come as my guest? No commitment, just an opportunity to see what we're about and ask questions. I agreed, my curiosity piqued. After Victor left, I called Sophia, both to thank her for the recommendation and to gently remind her about client confidentiality. I didn't share any specific details about your finances, she assured me. Just that you'd undertaken a rather creative approach to establishing your financial autonomy with your children. Still, I said, it was unexpected to have a stranger appear at my door knowing personal details about my family dynamics. You're absolutely right, Sophia acknowledged, her tone genuinely contrite. I should have asked your permission before connecting you with Victor. It won't happen again. Her immediate acknowledgement of the boundary crossing reassured me. Tell me more about this organization, FAN. Is it legitimate? Very much so, Sophia confirmed. I've referred several clients to their workshops. Victor founded it after his own experience with his son trying to take control of his finances following his wife's death. It's doing important work. By the time Thursday evening arrived, my initial reservations had given way to cautious interest. I dressed carefully in a navy pantsuit that projected both professionalism and confidence, and drove to the Ridgemont Community Center. The board meeting was held in a small conference room with about 10 people gathered around a large table. Victor rose to greet me, introducing me to each board member in turn. They were a diverse group, men and women ranging in age from their 60s to their 80s, from various professional backgrounds including law, education, healthcare, and business. We're so pleased you could join us, Eleanor, said Marion Green, a formidable-looking woman in her late 70s who served as board chair. Victor has told us a little about your experience, and we'd love to hear more when you're comfortable sharing. The meeting proceeded with reports from various committees, updates on ongoing projects, and discussion of upcoming events. I listened attentively, impressed by the professional yet warm atmosphere. These weren't just seniors with time on their hands. They were skilled professionals leveraging their expertise to address a significant issue affecting their peer group. During a break, I chatted with Diane Chen, a retired economics professor who headed the education committee. We're developing a new workshop series specifically for women who find themselves managing finances for the first time after widowhood or divorce, she explained. It's an area where there's tremendous need. That resonates with me, I admitted. After my husband died, I had to learn so much so quickly. And then there was the challenge of being taken seriously by financial professionals. Diane nodded, emphatically. Exactly. The double bias of age and gender can be particularly difficult to navigate. That's why peer-led education is so powerful. We understand the emotional aspects as well as the technical ones. As the meeting concluded, Victor approached me again. So, what do you think? Could you see yourself as part of this group? I took a moment to formulate my response. I'm impressed by what I've seen tonight. The organization seems well-run and focused on meaningful work. But? Victor prompted, sensing my hesitation. But I'd want to start slowly, I explained. Perhaps by volunteering with specific projects before considering a board position. I'd like to see firsthand how the programs work and where I might best contribute. He smiled broadly. A thoughtful and prudent approach. We wouldn't expect anything less. We have a workshop on digital banking security for seniors next Saturday. Would you be interested in attending as an observer? I agreed, feeling a growing sense of excitement about this unexpected new direction. As I drove home, I reflected on how differently this opportunity felt compared to Jennifer's business proposal. Here, my experience was valued not as a marketing tool, but as a source of insight that could help others. My age was seen not as a liability, but as an asset, a perspective that was refreshingly novel. For the next week, I threw myself into researching FAN more thoroughly. I reviewed their website, annual reports, and press coverage. I contacted 2 former board members whom Victor had provided as references. Everything I discovered reinforced my initial positive impression. This was a legitimate, mission-driven organization making a tangible difference in seniors' lives. The digital banking security workshop on Saturday further cemented my interest. I arrived early to help set up, arranging chairs and distributing handouts. Victor introduced me to the day's instructor, Betsy Harmon, a retired IT professional who specialized in making technology accessible to seniors. So, you're the financial mastermind Victor's been raving about, Betsy said with a warm smile. He says you pulled off the most elaborate financial lesson he's ever heard of. I laughed, still slightly uncomfortable with how widely my family drama had been shared. It was certainly unconventional, but it served its purpose. We need more unconventional thinking in this space, Betsy replied enthusiastically. Too many people approach senior education with condescension rather than creativity. As participants began arriving, I was struck by the diversity of the group, men and women from various backgrounds, some professionally dressed and clearly comfortable with technology, others more hesitant and visibly anxious about the subject matter. Betsy began the workshop with a simple but powerful statement. Digital banking isn't just for young people. It's for anyone who wants more control over their finances and more convenience in managing their money. Our age doesn't determine our capability, only our willingness to learn new tools. The workshop progressed from basic concepts of online security to practical demonstrations of banking apps and security features. Betsy had a gift for explaining complex technologies in accessible language without being patronizing. When participants had questions or encountered difficulties, she addressed them with patience and respect. During the hands-on practice session, I circulated among the tables, offering assistance as needed. An elderly gentleman named Howard was struggling to set up 2-factor authentication on his phone. I don't know why I'm even bothering with this, he said with frustration. My son keeps telling me I should just let him handle all my banking anyway. My children said something similar, I told him, sitting down beside him. They were convinced I couldn't manage my own money anymore. Howard looked up with interest. What did you do about it? Something rather extreme, I admitted with a smile. But the important thing is that I didn't give up my financial independence, and neither should you. Step by step, I guided Howard through the authentication setup, explaining each element clearly until he could complete the process himself. The pride in his eyes when he succeeded was deeply rewarding. I did it, he said, his voice tinged with wonder. Wait until I tell my son about this. He's always saying technology is beyond me. By the end of the workshop, I had helped several participants overcome specific challenges, drawing on both my technical knowledge and my understanding of the emotional aspects of maintaining financial independence as we age. The experience left me energized and convinced that I had found a meaningful way to channel my experiences toward helping others. When Victor approached me afterward, his expression was hopeful. Well, what did you think? Could you see yourself contributing to this kind of work regularly? Absolutely, I said without hesitation. The workshop was excellent, practical, respectful, and genuinely empowering for the participants. I'd like to get more involved, particularly with the Women's Financial Literacy Initiative Diane mentioned. Victor's face lit up. That's wonderful news, Eleanor. I'll connect you with Diane this week to discuss how you might contribute. As we packed up materials together, Victor shared more about his personal journey to founding FAN. After my wife died, my son Cameron was convinced I couldn't manage on my own. He started small, offering to help with bill payments, suggesting I consolidate accounts for simplicity. But within 6 months, he was pushing for power of attorney and suggesting I sell my home and move into a senior community. The parallels to my own experience were striking. What did you do? Nothing quite as elaborate as your 6-month charade, Victor chuckled. But I did hire a financial advisor, Sophia as it happens, and had her prepare a comprehensive evaluation of my financial management. Then I presented it to Cameron, along with a letter from my physician certifying my cognitive health. Did it work? I asked. Partially, Victor said with a slight frown. Cameron backed off the power of attorney discussion, but he still treats me as though I'm one poor decision away from financial ruin. That's why I started FAN, because I realized this wasn't just my problem, but a systemic issue affecting millions of seniors. His passion was evident and contagious. By the time we parted ways that afternoon, I had committed to attending the next Education Committee meeting and helping develop curriculum for the Women's Financial Literacy Program. The following week brought an unexpected complication. Jennifer called to invite me to dinner at her home, saying there was something important she wanted to discuss. Given our tense parting after her business proposal, I was apprehensive but agreed to come. When I arrived at Jennifer and Keith's comfortable suburban home, I was surprised to find Thomas there as well. The three of them sat me down in the living room, their expressions serious. "Mom," Jennifer began, "we need to talk about this Victor Reynolds person you've been spending time with." I stiffened, immediately on guard. "What about him?" Thomas leaned forward, his expression concerned. "We did some research after you mentioned his name. Did you know he was involved in a lawsuit 5 years ago? Something about a questionable land development deal. And this organization he runs," Jennifer added, "FAN. It doesn't have much of an online presence. Are you sure it's legitimate? We're concerned you might be getting pulled into something problematic." I took a deep breath, recognizing the familiar pattern emerging. My children assuming they needed to protect me from poor decisions, approaching me with that careful, concerned tone that set my teeth on edge. "I appreciate your concern," I said, keeping my voice even. "But I've done my own due diligence on both Victor and FAN. I've reviewed their financial reports, spoken with current and former board members, and attended both a board meeting and a workshop. I'm satisfied that it's a legitimate organization doing valuable work." "But the lawsuit," Thomas began. "Was dismissed," I finished for him. "Yes, I know about it. Victor told me himself. It was a frivolous claim from a disgruntled investor that never made it to trial." "You can't be too careful, Mom," Jennifer insisted. "There are so many scams targeting seniors these days." There it was again, that assumption that my age made me an easy target, incapable of critical thinking or proper evaluation. After all we'd been through, they were slipping back into the same patronizing pattern. I stood up, my patience evaporating. "Do you both realize what you're doing right now? After everything that happened, the 6-month charade, the birthday revelation, all the conversations we've had about respecting my autonomy?" Their expressions shifted from concern to confusion. "You're doing it again," I continued, assuming that because I'm older, I must be incapable of making sound judgments or protecting myself from potential exploitation. "You did minimal research and immediately concluded I must need your protection, without even asking me what steps I'd taken to verify the organization's legitimacy. Thomas at least had the grace to look ashamed. "We were just worried." "Worry is one thing," I interrupted. "Assuming incompetence is another. If you were genuinely concerned, you could have asked me about my process for evaluating Fan. You could have offered to review materials with me, not for me. You could have approached this as equals sharing information, rather than protectors, swooping in to save me from myself." A heavy silence fell over the room. Keith, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. "She's right, you know. You both went straight to intervention mode without first checking what Eleanor already knew or had done." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't even realize we were doing it again. It felt different somehow. Like we were just being caring children." "I understand that," I said, softening slightly. "But caring doesn't have to mean controlling or assuming incompetence. It can mean respecting my process while offering support if needed." Thomas nodded slowly. "You're right. We fell right back into the old pattern at the first sign of what we perceived as a potential threat. I'm sorry, Mom." I sat back down, ready to turn this into a teaching moment rather than just a confrontation. Let me tell you what I actually did to evaluate Fan before getting involved. For the next 20 minutes, I detailed my research process, reviewing financial documents, checking references, researching board members' backgrounds, and directly observing their programs. As I spoke, I could see both Jennifer and Thomas gradually relaxing, their expressions shifting from concern to respect. "That's extremely thorough," Thomas acknowledged when I finished. "More comprehensive than most due diligence I've seen, in professional contexts." "Because I take my financial and personal security seriously," I replied, "just as I always have. My age hasn't changed that fundamental aspect of who I am." Jennifer reached over to squeeze my hand. "I really am sorry, Mom. I think it's going to take conscious effort for us to fully break these patterns. But we're trying." "I know you are," I said, squeezing back. "And I appreciate that. All I ask is that you pause before assuming I need protection. Ask questions first. Approach me as a capable adult whose perspective and process deserve respect." "We will," Thomas promised. "And for what it's worth, now that we understand how carefully you've vetted this organization, we're genuinely happy you found something meaningful to be involved with." The tension gradually dissipated as the evening progressed. Over dinner, I shared more about Fan's programs and my specific interest in the Women's Financial Literacy Initiative. By the time I left, we had reached a new understanding, not perfect, but evolving in the right direction. The following month was a whirlwind of activity as I became more deeply involved with Fan. I joined the education committee formally and began working with Diane Chen to develop curriculum for the Women's Financial Workshop series. We titled it Taking the Reins, Financial Empowerment for Women in Transition, focusing specifically on widows and divorcees who suddenly found themselves managing finances after years of having partners handle those responsibilities. Drawing on my own experience after Richard's death, I developed modules on emotional readiness for financial independence, strategies for dealing with patronizing financial professionals, and practical steps for taking control of household finances. Diane contributed expertise on investment basics, retirement planning, and understanding economic indicators. Our collaboration was seamless and energizing. Diane's academic background complemented my practical experience, resulting in a curriculum that was both substantively sound and emotionally resonant. We planned a 6-week pilot program to begin in October, with sessions held at community centers throughout the region. As the program took shape, my relationship with Victor evolved as well. What had begun as a professional connection grew into a warm friendship. We often met for coffee after committee meetings, our conversations extending far beyond fan business to books, travel, politics, and our personal histories. Victor was a thoughtful listener and an engaging conversationalist. Unlike many men of his generation, he seemed entirely comfortable with strong, independent women. He spoke of his late wife, Catherine, with deep respect and affection, detailing how they had built their real estate business together as true partners. Catherine had the better eye for potential properties, he told me over dinner one evening. I handled the financing and negotiations, but she could walk into a rundown building and immediately see what it could become. We were a formidable, You must miss her terribly, I said. Every day, he acknowledged. But I've learned that grief doesn't have to prevent joy or new connections. It just becomes part of who you are. His perspective resonated deeply with my own experience of widowhood. Richard remained a cherished part of my history, but his absence no longer defined my present or future. One crisp October morning, Victor called with unexpected news. Eleanor, how would you feel about being interviewed for the Herald? They're doing a feature on FAN, and they're particularly interested in our new women's financial literacy program. I'm not sure, I hesitated. I've never been fond of publicity. I understand, Victor said gently. But your story is so powerful. Both your personal financial journey after Richard's death and your creative approach to teaching your children about respecting your financial autonomy. It could really resonate with other women facing similar challenges. After some consideration, I agreed. The reporter, a thoughtful woman named Lydia Pearson, met me at a quiet cafe near the community center. She began with questions about the women's workshop series, its objectives and structure, but gradually worked her way to more personal territory. Victor mentioned you had a rather unorthodox experience with your own adult children regarding your financial independence, she probed carefully. Would you be willing to share that story? Taking a deep breath, I recounted the tale of my elaborate 6-month charade, the fake investment losses, the foreclosure notice, the careful escalation of financial mistakes culminating in my birthday. Revelation. As I spoke, Lydia's expression shifted from professional interest to barely concealed amazement. That's extraordinary, she said finally. Most people would have simply argued with their children or cut them off, but you created this entire educational experience. I saw it as a teaching opportunity, I explained. Telling them they were wrong wouldn't have changed their deep-seated assumptions. They needed to experience the consequences of those assumptions to truly understand their impact. And did it work? She asked. I smiled. Eventually. There have been some relapses. Old patterns are difficult to break completely. But yes, our relationship is now built on mutual respect rather than patronizing concern. The article appeared. The following Sunday featured prominently in the lifestyle section with the headline, Financial Autonomy at Any Age, How One Woman Taught Her Children a Valuable Lesson. The piece was thoughtful and balanced, detailing both my personal story and the broader work of FAN without sensationalism. What I hadn't anticipated was the response. By Monday afternoon, the community center had received dozens of calls from women interested in the workshop series. Marion Green, our board chair, called me directly. Eleanor, you've struck a nerve, she said, her voice animated with excitement. We've already filled the waiting list for the next 2 sessions, and requests keep coming in. Would you be willing to add more workshops to accommodate the demand? The response was overwhelming but gratifying. Clearly, the issues of financial autonomy and age-based assumptions resonated with many older women. Diane and I quickly reorganized our plans, scheduling additional sessions and recruiting more volunteer facilitators to help manage the expanded program. Among the flood of responses was an invitation that took me by surprise, a request to appear on Morning Conversations, a popular local television talk show, to discuss senior financial autonomy. My first instinct was to decline, uncomfortable, with the idea of such public exposure. But Victor encouraged me to reconsider. This is an opportunity to reach even more people with this important message, he pointed out. And you're uniquely qualified to speak to both the emotional and practical aspects of financial independence for seniors. After much deliberation, I agreed. The morning of the interview, I arrived at the studio feeling uncharacteristically nervous. The host, Melissa Green, greeted me warmly in the green room. "We're so pleased to have you on the show, Mrs. Mitchell," she said, shaking my hand. "Your story has generated quite a buzz. Our producer said the phone lines lit up as soon as we announced you'd be our guest today." Once on set, under the bright studio lights, my nervousness gradually gave way to focused determination. This wasn't about me, it was about the important work we were doing at FAN and the message of empowerment we wanted to share. "So, Eleanor," Melissa began after introducing me, "you went to extraordinary lengths to teach your adult children about respecting your financial autonomy. What prompted such a dramatic approach?" "It wasn't my first choice," I admitted with a small smile. "But when conventional conversations failed to shift their fundamental assumptions, that my age somehow rendered me incapable of managing my own money, I realized a more dramatic object lesson was needed." "And you maintained this charade for 6 months?" Melissa asked, clearly impressed. "Creating fake financial disasters? Pretending to make catastrophic mistakes? That must have been challenging." "It was," I acknowledged. "There were moments when I questioned whether the lesson was worth the worry I was causing them. But each time I considered coming clean, one of them would say something so condescending, so dismissive of my capabilities, that my resolve would strengthen all over again." The interview continued for 15 minutes, covering not just my personal story, but the broader issues of ageism in financial contexts and the work we were doing at FAN. By the end, Melissa was visibly moved. "What advice would you give to other seniors facing similar assumptions from their adult children?" she asked as our time wound down. "First, recognize that these assumptions often come from a place of genuine concern, not malice," I said thoughtfully. "But concern without respect becomes control, and that's what we must resist. Be clear about your boundaries. Demonstrate your capabilities consistently. And if necessary, get creative about showing rather than telling your children that you remain fully capable of managing your own affairs." As the segment concluded, Melissa thanked me warmly. "You've given us much to think about, Eleanor, and I suspect many adult children watching today might be reconsidering some of their own assumptions about their aging parents." The response to the television appearance was immediate and overwhelming. By that afternoon, my phone was buzzing with messages from friends who had seen the interview. Jennifer called, her voice a mixture of pride and lingering embarrassment. "Mom, you were amazing," she said. "Though I did sink into the couch a bit when you described how condescending we'd been. Seeing our behavior described on television was illuminating." "That wasn't my intention," I assured her. "The goal wasn't to embarrass you, but to help others recognize these patterns in their own families." "I know," she said graciously. "And from the response you're getting, it seems like you've succeeded." The unprecedented interest in our workshop series prompted an emergency meeting of FAN's Education Committee. We gathered in the community center's conference room, surrounded by stacks of registration forms and messages from interested participants. "We need to scale up significantly," Diane said, leafing through the paperwork. "The demand far exceeds our current capacity." "Agreed," Marion nodded. "But can we maintain quality if we expand too quickly?" The personal connection is crucial to what makes these workshops effective. For the next 2 hours, we strategized approaches to meet the growing demand while preserving the program's integrity. We settled on a multi-pronged approach, training additional facilitators, creating a robust resource guide for those on waiting lists, and developing an online component to complement the in-person workshops. Eleanor, Marion said as the meeting concluded, given your central role in developing this curriculum and your newfound public profile, would you consider taking on a more formal leadership position? We'd like to create a new role, Director of Women's Financial Empowerment Programs, and we hope you'll accept it. The offer caught me off guard. I had envisioned my involvement with FAN as a meaningful volunteer commitment, not a new career direction. But as I considered the proposition, I recognized the opportunity it presented to amplify the impact of work I deeply believed in. I'd be honored, I said after a moment's reflection, though I'd want to maintain flexibility in terms of hours and responsibilities. Of course, Marion agreed readily. We're thinking part-time, perhaps 20 hours weekly, with the freedom to structure those hours as best fits your life. As I drove home that evening, my mind whirled with the day's developments. From newspaper article to television appearance to job offer in the span of a week, my quiet retirement had suddenly transformed into something far more dynamic and public. When I arrived home, I found Victor waiting on my porch with a bouquet of autumnal flowers. I watched your interview, he said, handing me the vibrant arrangement. You were magnificent, poised, articulate, and so compelling. I've never been more proud to know you. His praise warmed me, but a flicker of uncertainty must have shown on my face. What's wrong? He asked, perceiving my mixed emotions. I invited him inside and, over cups of Earl Grey tea, shared my thoughts about the job offer and the whirlwind of attention my story had generated. I never sought the spotlight, I admitted. My motivation for joining FAN was to help others like me navigate the challenges of maintaining financial independence as we age. I'm not sure how I feel about becoming the public face of this issue. Victor listened attentively, his expression thoughtful. You've clearly touched a nerve, he observed. Your story resonates because it's both personal and universal, but that doesn't mean you have to embrace a public role if it doesn't feel right to you. His understanding reassured me. Marion has offered me considerable flexibility in shaping the position. Perhaps I can focus more on curriculum development and facilitator training, with limited public-facing responsibilities. That sounds like a wise approach, Victor agreed. And remember, you can always adjust as you go, taking on more or less of the public aspect based on your comfort level. As we continued talking, my initial reservations gave way to growing excitement about the possibilities this new role presented. By the time Victor left that evening, I had decided to accept the position on my terms, focusing on program development while taking a measured approach to more public engagements. The next morning, I called Marion to formally accept the offer and discuss the parameters of the role. She was delighted, immediately outlining plans for office space at the community center and support resources to help me manage the expanding program. We'll schedule a board meeting next week to formalize your appointment, she said enthusiastically. And we should discuss compensation. We're a nonprofit, of course, but we want to offer a stipend that reflects the value of your contribution. The mention of payment surprised me slightly. I had been approaching my work with FAN as volunteerism, not expecting financial compensation. But Marion's matter-of-fact treatment of the topic reminded me that valuing my expertise was part of the respect I had fought so hard to establish. Thank you, Marion, I said sincerely. I appreciate that recognition. The following week was a flurry of activity as I prepared for my new role. I cleared out the small bedroom I had been using as a catch-all storage space, transforming it into a home office with a proper desk, comfortable chair, and organized filing system. I met with Diane to review our curriculum expansion plans and interviewed potential facilitators for the additional workshop sessions. Amidst it all, Thomas called with news of his own. "Mom, I got the job in Hartford," he said, excitement evident in his voice. "I'll be moving back to Connecticut at the end of the month." "That's wonderful news," I replied, genuinely pleased that he would be closer. Have you started looking for a place to live? Actually, I was hoping to stay with you for a few weeks while I apartment hunt, he said. Would that be okay? A year ago, this request would have been a given. Of course, my son could stay with me. But our relationship had evolved, and I found myself weighing the implications more carefully. I'd be happy to have you here, I said after a moment's consideration. Though I should mention my schedule has become quite full with my new role at FAN, I won't be as available as I might have been in the past. I understand, Mom, Thomas replied immediately. I'll be busy with the new job anyway. We'll be like two responsible adults sharing space, not mother and child. His understanding tone reinforced how far we had come. In that case, your old room awaits. Though it's a bit more sparsely furnished these days, I donated your high school trophies to make space for my sewing projects. Thomas laughed. Fair enough. It's about time those participation ribbons found a new home. The day of the board meeting arrived, and I dressed with particular care in a well-tailored burgundy suit that projected both professionalism and confidence. Victor picked me up, looking distinguished in a charcoal gray suit with a subtle blue tie. Nervous? He asked as we drove to the community center. A little, I admitted. It's been a long time since I started a new job. Teaching high school English seems a world away from directing a financial empowerment program. Yet the fundamental skills are remarkably similar, Victor observed. Clear communication, empathy, the ability to make complex concepts accessible. These were the hallmarks of your teaching career, and they'll serve you equally well in this new role. His confidence in me was reassuring. By the time we arrived at the community center, my nervousness had given way to focused anticipation. The board members greeted me warmly, several commenting on my television appearance and the positive attention it had brought to fans' work. Marion called the meeting to order promptly at 6, moving efficiently through the agenda items until reaching my appointment. As you all know, we've experienced unprecedented interest in our women's financial literacy program, largely due to Eleanor's curriculum development and recent media appearances, she began. To build on this momentum, we're proposing the creation of a new position, Director of Women's Financial Empowerment Programs, and recommending Eleanor Mitchell for the role. She detailed the position's responsibilities and the proposed compensation, then opened the floor for discussion. The board's questions were thoughtful and respectful, focusing on programmatic vision and growth strategies rather than questioning my capabilities. When the vote came, it was unanimous. Marion smiled broadly as she announced the result. Congratulations, Eleanor. We're delighted to welcome you to the FAN team in this new capacity. As the meeting adjourned, board members approached with individual congratulations and offers of support. Diane hugged me warmly. This is going to be wonderful, she said enthusiastically. We're going to help so many women reclaim their financial confidence. The celebratory mood continued as Victor took me to dinner at an elegant restaurant overlooking the river. As we toasted my new position with glasses of champagne, he reached across the table to take my hand. I can't help thinking about how extraordinary this journey has been, he said, his eyes warm with admiration. From that Christmas conversation with your children to this moment, becoming a director at an organization dedicated to the very issue that sparked your own battle for respect. It's a remarkable full circle. His observation struck me deeply. Indeed, what had begun as a personal struggle for dignity and autonomy had evolved into something far larger, a mission to help others navigate similar challenges. The frustration and hurt I had felt at my children's assumptions had been transformed into purposeful action. Life has a way of surprising us, I replied, squeezing his hand gently. A year ago, I could never have imagined any of this. The work with FAN, the public advocacy, or... I hesitated momentarily, then continued. Or meeting someone like you. Victor's expression softened. I feel the same way, Eleanor. When Catherine died, I thought that chapter of my life was closed permanently. I never expected to find such a meaningful connection again, especially not with someone I met through Fan's work. As our dinner progressed, our conversation deepened, touching on our hopes for the future, both for Fan's programs and for our evolving relationship. By the time we left the restaurant, walking along the riverfront in the cool evening air, something had shifted subtly between us. What had been a warm friendship with hints of deeper potential now felt like the clear beginning of something more significant. Under the glow of riverside lamps, Victor stopped and turned to face me. "Eleanor, I realize this may seem sudden, but I want you to know that my feelings for you have grown far beyond professional admiration or even friendship. I find myself thinking about you throughout the day, looking forward to our conversations, and feeling a connection I hadn't thought possible at this stage of my life." His directness was both startling and refreshing. "I feel it too," I admitted, surprised by how easily the words came. "This isn't something I was looking for, but it's become increasingly important to me." He stepped closer, his hand gently cupping my cheek. "May I kiss you, Eleanor?" The tenderness in his question touched me deeply. "Yes," I whispered, closing the distance between us. His kiss was gentle and respectful, yet filled with genuine emotion, a perfect reflection of the man himself. When we finally drew apart, I felt a quiet joy spreading through me, a sensation of possibility I hadn't experienced in years. The drive home was filled with a comfortable silence, punctuated by occasional shared smiles. When Victor walked me to my door, he kissed me again, more briefly but with equal warmth. "Would you have dinner with me on Saturday?" he asked. Not to discuss Fan or programs or curriculum, but simply as two people exploring what might develop between them. "I'd like that very much," I replied. As I watched him drive away, I felt a sense of wonder at how thoroughly my life had transformed in less than a year. From a widow fighting for financial respect from her children to a program director embarking on a new romance. None of it had been planned, yet all of it felt deeply right. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of change as I settled into my new role at Fan, and Thomas moved back to Connecticut, temporarily occupying his old bedroom while apartment hunting in Hartford. Having my son back in the house after years of living alone required some adjustment. Thomas was respectful of my space and schedule, but his presence inevitably altered the routines I had established. We developed a comfortable rhythm, sharing breakfast before heading to our respective workdays, occasionally having dinner together when our schedules aligned, but otherwise maintaining the independent lives of two adults who happened to share living space. One evening, as we were clearing up after a shared meal, Thomas broached a subject we had been dancing around. "So, you and Victor seem to be getting quite close," he observed casually. I felt a momentary flash of defensiveness, an echo of our past dynamic where my personal choices might be questioned or judged. But Thomas's tone held only genuine interest, not judgment or concern. "Yes, we are," I acknowledged, deciding on straightforward honesty. "It's developed quite naturally from our work together at Fan." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "He seems like a remarkable person. I was impressed by his depth of knowledge and how attentively he listens when others are speaking. Those are qualities I value in him as well," I said, relieved by his positive assessment. "It's just—" Thomas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's good to see you happy, Mom. After Dad died, you focused so much on practical matters. The finances, the house, building your independence. I worried sometimes that you might not allow yourself to experience this kind of connection again." His insight surprised me. In his own way, he had been concerned about me all along, not about my financial capabilities, but about my emotional well-being. The realization softened something in me that I hadn't known was still hardened. "Thank you, Thomas," I said sincerely. "I wasn't looking for this. It's been quite unexpected. But yes, It brings me happiness." He smiled, a genuine expression of warmth. "Then I'm happy for you both. And for what it's worth, Jennifer feels the same way. She mentioned after meeting Victor that he looks at you with genuine admiration, not just affection. That matters." The conversation marked another milestone in our evolving relationship. My son acknowledging and supporting my romantic life not as a parent concerned about a child's choices, but as one adult respecting another's emotional journey. Saturday evening arrived, and with it my first official date with Victor, an evening explicitly focused on our personal connection rather than our professional collaboration. I dressed with particular care in a deep blue dress that I knew flattered my figure, applying makeup with a bit more attention than usual. When the doorbell rang, I was surprised to find Thomas answering it before I could reach the door. I paused at the top of the stairs, watching as my son greeted Victor with genuine warmth. "Good evening, Victor," Thomas said, shaking his hand firmly. "Mom will be down in a moment. Would you like to come in?" "Thank you, Thomas," Victor replied, stepping into the foyer with a bouquet of flowers in hand. "It's good to see you again. I understand congratulations are in order on your new position in Hartford." Their easy conversation continued for a few moments before I descended the stairs. Victor looked up, his expression shifting to appreciative admiration as he saw me. "Eleanor, you look beautiful," he said simply, presenting the bouquet, an elegant arrangement of blue hydrangeas and white roses. "Thank you," I replied, taking the flowers. "These are lovely." As I put the flowers in water, I couldn't help but reflect on the scene I had just witnessed. My son and this new man in my life engaging in comfortable conversation, treating each other with respect and genuine interest. It was yet another unexpected gift in this year of transformations. Victor had made reservations at Bellini's, an upscale Italian restaurant known for its intimate atmosphere and excellent wine list. As we were seated at a corner table with soft lighting and the gentle notes of a piano playing in the background, I felt a flutter of anticipation. This was our first outing explicitly acknowledged as a date rather than a professional dinner or friendly get-together. "I must admit, I feel a bit nervous," Victor confessed as we perused the menus. "It's been a long time since I've been on an actual date." His candor put me at ease. "Me too," I admitted with a smile. "Though I'm not sure I was ever particularly good at dating, even in my youth." "I find that hard to believe," he said, his eyes warm with appreciation. "You're such engaging company, intelligent, insightful, with that wonderful dry wit." The evening unfolded with a natural rhythm, our conversation flowing effortlessly from topic to topic. We discovered shared tastes in literature and music, similar political perspectives, and a common love of travel. We also unearthed differences. Victor enjoyed outdoor adventures like hiking and kayaking, while I preferred cultural experiences such as theater and museums. Yet even these differences felt complementary rather than divisive. Over dessert, a decadent tiramisu we agreed to share, Victor brought up a subject we had been circling. "Eleanor, I want to be clear about something," he began, his tone serious, but warm. "At our age, I believe in being direct about intentions and hopes. I'm not interested in casual companionship. I find myself deeply drawn to you, to your intelligence, your principles, your quiet strength. I'm hoping to build something meaningful together, if you're open to that possibility." His directness was both startling and deeply refreshing. No games, no ambiguity, just honest expression of interest and intent. "I appreciate your clarity," I replied, taking a moment to formulate my response. "And I share your perspective on directness. I'm not interested in casual companionship either. What's developing between us feels significant to me, and I'm open to exploring where it might lead." Relief and pleasure mingled in his expression. "I'm glad we're aligned on this," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. I believe in moving forward thoughtfully, giving a relationship space and time to develop naturally, but I also believe in being clear about the direction I hope it might take. As we left the restaurant, walking hand in hand to his car, I felt a sense of quiet joy. This unexpected connection with Victor represented yet another dimension of my transformed life, one I hadn't been seeking but now welcomed wholeheartedly. When we reached my home, Victor walked me to the door. The porch light cast a warm glow as we stood facing each other. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," he said softly, his hands gently holding mine. "May I see you again tomorrow? Perhaps we could visit the new exhibition at the art museum." "I'd like that," I replied, aware of the pleasant anticipation already building for our next meeting. His kiss goodnight was tender, yet conveyed deepening emotion. A perfect conclusion to an evening that had marked the official beginning of something new and promising in both our lives. As I entered the house, I found Thomas reading in the living room. He looked up with a smile that held no teasing or judgment, just genuine happiness for me. "Good evening?" he asked simply. "Very," I confirmed, my tone conveying more than the single word might suggest. Thomas nodded, understanding the unspoken depth of my response. "I'm glad, Mom. You deserve this." His words stayed with me as I prepared for bed, reflecting on the extraordinary turns my life had taken. What had begun with frustration at my children's assumptions about my financial capabilities had led, through a series of unexpected developments, to a completely transformed existence. New purpose through my work with Fan, new confidence in my public advocacy, and now, potentially, new love with a man who saw and valued me completely. As I drifted toward sleep, I found myself deeply grateful for the journey, even for the difficult beginning that had catalyzed so much positive change. Sometimes, it seemed, the most challenging circumstances led to the most unexpected blessings. And at 68, I was discovering that life still held abundant possibilities for growth, connection, and joy, all on my own terms, with the respect and dignity I had rightfully claimed. The museum date with Victor the following day deepened our connection further. We wandered through the galleries, discussing the artworks with animated interest, discovering similar aesthetic preferences and occasionally disagreeing about particular pieces, each respecting the other's different perspective. I love how we can see things differently without it becoming a contest about who's right, Victor observed as we debated the merits of a particularly abstract sculpture. Catherine and I were the same way. We could disagree vigorously about film or art or books, but it never diminished our enjoyment of the discussion or each other. Richard and I were similar, I replied, appreciating his open acknowledgement of his late wife. Though he had more conventional tastes than I did, he preferred landscapes and portraits, art that represented the world accurately. I've always been drawn to works that capture emotion or atmosphere more than precise detail. Victor nodded thoughtfully. It's interesting, isn't it? How we can carry forward the positive dynamics from previous relationships without trying to recreate them exactly. I'm not looking for another Catherine, and I suspect you're not looking for another Richard. No, I agreed. What we had was precious and irreplaceable, but that doesn't mean something equally valuable, though entirely different, can't develop. Now. His smile was warm with understanding. Exactly. We honor what came before while remaining open to what might be now. After the museum, we had lunch at a charming cafe in the Arts District, continuing our conversation about everything from current events to childhood memories. The ease between us deepened with each passing hour, a comfortable rapport that felt remarkably natural for such a new relationship. As the afternoon waned, Victor suggested a walk in the nearby botanical garden. Strolling among late-blooming flowers and ornamental grasses touched by autumn colors, our hands found each other, naturally. The simple physical connection, fingers intertwined as we walked, conveyed a growing intimacy that required no words. When we eventually returned to my home, Thomas was out, the house quiet and bathed in late afternoon sunlight. I invited Victor in for tea, both of us reluctant to end our time together. In the kitchen, as I prepared the tea, Victor moved behind me, gently placing his hands on my shoulders. "I've had a wonderful day with you, Eleanor," he said softly. I turned to face him, our proximity suddenly charged with awareness. "So have I," I replied, my voice slightly lower than usual. The kiss that followed was different from our previous exchanges, deeper, more passionate, expressing the growing desire between us. When we finally drew apart, both slightly breathless, Victor's eyes held a question. "Stay for dinner?" I asked, answering the unspoken query with a simple invitation to extend our time together. "I'd love to," he replied, his smile warm with pleasure and anticipation. We prepared the meal together, moving around the kitchen, with surprising coordination for two people who had never cooked together before. Victor proved himself capable and helpful, chopping vegetables precisely while I prepared a simple pasta dish. Over dinner, our conversation turned to more practical matters, our respective schedules for the coming week, the upcoming fan board meeting, Thomas's apartment hunting progress. The ease with which we navigated these everyday topics further confirmed the natural fit between us. We could discuss both profound philosophical questions and mundane daily logistics with equal engagement. After dinner, we moved to the living room with glasses of wine, settling comfortably on the sofa. As twilight deepened outside the windows, our conversation gradually gave way to more physical expression, tender kisses and gentle exploration that spoke of deepening connection. At some point, the unmistakable sound of a key in the front door broke the moment. Victor and I drew apart slightly, though without embarrassment or haste, as Thomas entered the house. "Oh, sorry," Thomas said, clearly recognizing he had interrupted something. "I can head back out if you'd like some privacy." "No need," I replied, appreciating his matter-of-fact tone. "We were just enjoying the evening. How was your apartment hunting?" Thomas joined us briefly, sharing details about a promising place he had viewed near his new office. His interaction with Victor was natural and respectful, two adults engaging in casual conversation without awkwardness or tension. After a few minutes, he excused himself tactfully, mentioning some work he needed to review before Monday. Once Thomas had gone upstairs, Victor checked his watch reluctantly. "It's getting late," he observed. "I should probably head home, though I must admit I'm finding it difficult to want to leave." His candor made me smile. "I'm finding it equally difficult to want you to go," I admitted. "But yes, it's probably wise." At the door, our goodnight kiss held both the warmth of our day together and promise for what might develop between us. "Dinner at my place on Wednesday," Victor suggested. "I make a reasonably decent roast chicken, or so I've been told." "I'd love that," I replied, "and I'm intrigued to see your culinary skills firsthand." As I closed the door behind him, I leaned against it for a moment, savoring the feelings coursing through me: joy, anticipation, and yes, a reawakening of desire I had thought might be permanently dormant after Richard's death. At 68, I was discovering that emotional and physical passion remained very much alive, waiting only for the right connection to reignite. The following week brought a new dimension to my work at FAN when Marion approached me with an unexpected opportunity. "Eleanor, we've been invited to testify before the state legislature's Committee on Aging," she explained. "They're considering new protections against financial exploitation of seniors, and they want to hear from organizations like ours about the issues our members face." The prospect was both intimidating and exciting. "When is the hearing?" I asked. 3 weeks from now," Marion replied. "We'd like you to represent FAN, given your particular expertise in the emotional aspects of financial autonomy for seniors. Your personal story, combined with what you've learned through developing the Women's Workshop program, would be especially compelling for the legislators. The request represented yet another expansion of my role, from volunteer to program director, and now potentially to public advocate at the legislative level. Each step had taken me further from the quiet retirement I had once envisioned, yet each felt increasingly aligned with a purpose I hadn't known I was seeking. "I'd be honored," I said after considering the request. "Though I'd want to prepare thoroughly. I've never testified before a legislative committee." "Of course," Marion nodded. "We'll arrange practice sessions with our policy advisor, and we'll help you develop your testimony to maximize impact within the time constraints." That evening, I shared the news with Victor over the phone. His enthusiasm was immediate and genuine. "Eleanor, that's wonderful. Your perspective would be incredibly valuable to the committee, and you're a natural communicator, clear, persuasive, and authentic." His confidence in me was both touching and fortifying. "It's a bit daunting," I admitted, "but I believe strongly in the importance of these protections. Too many seniors lose financial autonomy not because of their own limitations, but because others assume they can't handle their affairs." "Exactly," Victor agreed. "And who better to articulate that reality than someone who has both lived it personally and now works directly with others facing similar challenges?" His support strengthened my resolve. Over the next 3 weeks, I worked diligently with FAN's policy team to prepare my testimony, crafting a statement that balanced personal narrative with substantive policy recommendations. We conducted multiple practice sessions, refining both content and delivery until I felt confident in my ability to convey our message effectively. The Herald article generated unprecedented interest in FAN's programs, particularly the women's financial literacy workshops. I met with Senator Harrison and 2 other committee members to discuss specific amendments to the bill. Diane and I expanded our curriculum to include a module specifically addressing familial financial overreach, drawing on my experience and the stories of other workshop participants. Amidst it all, my relationship with Victor deepened steadily. We established comfortable routines: Sunday brunches at his townhouse overlooking the harbor, midweek dinners at my home, cultural outings to museums and concerts. We met each other's friends, finding easy integration into one another's social circles. And gradually, inevitably, our physical relationship evolved as well, both of us discovering that desire and intimacy remained very much alive, despite our advancing years. Thomas found an apartment in Hartford and moved out of my home, but he remained a steady presence in my life, calling regularly, joining Victor and me for occasional dinners, taking a genuine interest in my advocacy work. Jennifer and Keith visited frequently as well, often bringing their children, who seemed increasingly comfortable with Grandma's boyfriend, as they teasingly referred to Victor. One evening in late November, as Victor and I enjoyed a quiet dinner at his townhouse, he broached a subject we had been circling for some time. "Eleanor," he began, setting down his wine glass deliberately, "we've been seeing each other for several months now, and I find myself thinking more and more about our future." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I'm not proposing marriage," he clarified with a gentle smile. "At least not yet, but I am wondering if we might consider taking another step forward. Perhaps spending more than just evenings and weekends together." "What did you have in mind?" I asked, though I suspected I knew where the conversation was heading. "I thought we might discuss the possibility of living together," he said, his expression both hopeful and carefully restrained. "Not immediately, but as something to consider for the near future." The suggestion wasn't entirely unexpected, yet it still gave me pause. Living together would represent a significant commitment, one I hadn't anticipated making again after Richard's death. But as I looked across the table at Victor, this thoughtful, principled man who had become such an important part of my life, I found the prospect more appealing than alarming. "I'd like to think about it," I said honestly. "It's a significant step, one I want to consider carefully, but I'm not opposed to the idea. Victor reached across the table to take my hand. Of course. There's no rush. I just wanted to put the possibility on the table, to let you know where my thoughts are heading. His patience and understanding reinforced my growing certainty that, whatever form our relationship took moving forward, it would be built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. The following weekend, I invited Jennifer, Keith, and Thomas for Sunday dinner, feeling it was time to update them on this new development in my relationship with Victor. I prepared Richard's famous beef Wellington, a symbolic choice that wasn't lost on my children as they gathered around the dining table. "This looks amazing, Mom," Jennifer said, recognizing the dish immediately. "You haven't made Dad's beef Wellington in years." "It felt like the right occasion," I replied, meeting her gaze with quiet significance. After serving the meal, I took a moment to gather my thoughts before speaking. "I wanted to talk with you all about Victor and me," I began. "Our relationship has grown quite serious, and he's raised the possibility of our living together at some point in the not-too-distant future." A brief silence followed my announcement. Then Thomas spoke first. "How do you feel about that, Mom?" I appreciated his direct question, focused on my feelings rather than offering immediate judgment or advice. "I'm considering it seriously," I replied. "Victor is an important part of my life now, and the prospect of sharing a home with him feels increasingly natural." Jennifer nodded slowly. "Have you thought about the practical aspects? Whose home you would live in, how you would combine households?" "We're just beginning those discussions," I said. "But we're both inclined toward finding a new place together rather than one of us moving into the other's established home. A fresh start that belongs to both of us equally." "That sounds wise," Keith observed. "Equal footing from the beginning." The conversation continued thoughtfully, my children asking questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than concern or disapproval. Where once they might have worried about my financial vulnerability or cautioned me against hasty decisions, they now engaged as supportive adults respecting another adult's life choices. "You know, Mom," Thomas said as the evening drew to a close, "seeing you with Victor, how you interact, how you support each other's independence while sharing genuine connection, it's been eye-opening for me. I've learned a lot about what partnership can look like at its best." His observation touched me deeply. My relationship with Victor had indeed become something I was proud of. A connection based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. That my children could see and appreciate its healthy dynamics felt like yet another unexpected gift in this year of transformations. December brought the culmination of several significant threads in my evolving life. The Senate committee voted to advance Bill 437 with several of our recommended amendments incorporated, a victory for fans' advocacy efforts. The expanded Women's Financial Literacy Program graduated its first cohort of participants, with remarkably positive feedback and growing waiting lists for future sessions. And Victor and I, after careful consideration and many frank discussions, decided to begin looking for a home we might share. "Nothing too large," he specified as we reviewed real estate listings with a patient agent named Barbara, "but with enough space for both of us to have personal areas, your writing desk, my reading nook, and a proper kitchen," I added, "one designed for two people to cook together comfortably." "Absolutely," Victor agreed with a warm smile. Our dinner collaborations have become one of my favorite aspects of our time together. We viewed several properties, a charming Victorian that needed more renovation than we wanted to undertake, a sleek modern condominium that felt too impersonal, a cozy bungalow with insufficient space for our combined possessions. None felt quite right until Barbara suggested a property that had just come on the market, a well-maintained Cape Cod on a quiet street equidistant between the community center where I worked and the harbor that Victor loved. From the moment we stepped through the front door, the house felt welcoming, bright with natural light, thoughtfully designed, with a garden visible through French doors at the rear. The previous owners had expanded the kitchen, creating exactly the sort of space Victor and I had envisioned for our shared cooking adventures. The living room featured built-in bookshelves perfect for our combined libraries, and upstairs, a small room overlooking the garden could serve as my home office. "What do you think?" Victor asked quietly as we stood in the master bedroom, its windows framing a view of mature oak trees. "It feels right," I replied simply. I could imagine us here together. His smile conveyed understanding of all the emotional complexity contained in that statement. The acknowledgement that I was ready to create a new home with him, distinct from the one I had shared with Richard. We made an offer that afternoon, and 3 days later received word that it had been accepted. The closing was scheduled for mid-January, with possession to follow in February. A timeline that would allow us to thoughtfully prepare for combining our households. As Christmas approached, I decided to host a gathering at my home, partly to celebrate the holiday, but also to mark the beginning of my transition from this house filled with memories to the new home Victor and I would create together. I invited my children and grandchildren, Victor's son Cameron and his family, who lived in Boston but would be visiting for the holidays, and several friends from Fan, who had become important presences in my life. The evening was festive and warm, the house filled with conversation and laughter. Victor moved comfortably among my family and friends, now an established presence in my life rather than a newcomer. Cameron, initially reserved, gradually relaxed as he observed his father's evident happiness and the genuine welcome from my family. After dinner, as we gathered in the living room with dessert and coffee, Thomas surprised me by raising his glass in an impromptu toast. "To my mother," he began, "who taught us all a valuable lesson about respect, dignity, and the dangers of making assumptions based on age." Here, Jennifer seconded, raising her glass with a smile. "And to new beginnings," Thomas continued, his gaze encompassing both Victor and me. "May your shared home be as filled with joy and mutual respect as your relationship has been from the start." The simple toast brought unexpected tears to my eyes, not of sadness, but of profound gratitude for how thoroughly our family dynamic had transformed over the past year. What had begun with frustration and even anger at being underestimated had blossomed into new understanding, deeper respect, and genuine support for my evolving life. Later that evening, after most guests had departed, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Cameron, who had volunteered to help with the final cleanup. He worked quietly alongside me for several minutes before speaking. "I owe you an apology, Eleanor," he said finally, his voice low but clear. "When my father first told me about you, I was skeptical, concerned that he might be rushing into something, or that his judgment might be clouded by grief and loneliness." I nodded, acknowledging his candor without interrupting. "But seeing you together tonight, how you interact, how genuinely happy he is, I realize my concerns were misplaced. You're good for each other, and I'm grateful he's found someone like you at this stage of his life." His words touched me deeply. "Thank you, Cameron. That means a great deal to me." "You know," he continued, a rueful smile playing at the corners of his mouth, "my father mentioned the lesson you taught your children about financial autonomy. I recognized myself in that story more than I'd like to admit. I've probably been guilty of similar assumptions about my father's capabilities. It's a common dynamic," I said gently, "often coming from a place of genuine concern." "Yes, but concern without respect becomes control," Cameron replied, echoing the phrase I had used so often in my advocacy work. "I'm trying to be more mindful of that now." His self-awareness impressed me. "That awareness is the first step toward change," I observed. "And for what it's worth, your father speaks of you with great pride and affection. He values your relationship deeply." Cameron's expression softened. "Thank you for telling me that. and thank you for bringing such joy into his life. He deserves it. And from what I can see, so do you. On a bright January morning, I sat in Sophia's office for our quarterly portfolio review, our professional meeting now infused with the warmth of friendship that had developed through our collaboration on Operation Financial Incompetence. "So," she said as we concluded the financial discussion, "the house closing is next week. Your relationship with Victor continues to thrive. Your advocacy work is making real policy impact, and your children now treat you as the capable adult you've always been. Not bad for a year that began with them trying to take control of your finances." I laughed at her succinct summary. "When you put it that way, it does sound rather remarkable." "It is remarkable," Sophia insisted. "Most people would have either acquiesced to their children's controlling behavior or simply argued against it. You took a creative, albeit dramatic, approach that fundamentally changed the dynamic. And look at all that's flowed from that decision." Her perspective gave me pause. I hadn't really thought of it that way. That everything that's happened this year stems from that initial decision to teach them a lesson rather than simply fight with them. "Exactly," Sophia nodded. "Your unorthodox response to their assumptions opened up possibilities that a more conventional reaction might not have. It's quite inspiring, actually." As I drove home from the meeting, I reflected on Sophia's observation. The journey had indeed been extraordinary. From widow fighting for financial respect, to program director, public advocate, and woman embarking on a new chapter of life, with a man who had never known me as anything other than capable, resourceful, and independent. Life at 68 had proved to be more interesting, more rewarding, and more full of potential than I could have imagined. A reminder that chapters don't close with age. They simply evolve in ways both challenging and beautiful. The following week, Victor and I sat side by side in the closing attorney's office, signing the documents that would make the Cape Cod house our shared home. As I affixed my signature to the final page, I felt a profound sense of rightness, not just about the house, but about all the choices that had led me to this moment. "Well," Victor said as we left the attorney's office, holding hands in the winter sunshine, "we're officially homeowners together. How does it feel?" I considered the question thoughtfully. "It feels like the natural next step in a journey I never expected to take, but am profoundly grateful to be on." He squeezed my hand gently. "I feel exactly the same way. Shall we celebrate with lunch at the harbor? We can watch the boats and talk about where we want to place furniture in our new home." Our new home. The phrase resonated with promise and possibility. As we walked toward the harbor, I reflected once more on the extraordinary turns my life had taken since that fateful Christmas conversation. What had begun with frustration at being underestimated had blossomed into new purpose, new love, and new understanding with my children. I had set out simply to teach them that I was still capable of managing my own finances despite my age. In the process, I had rediscovered parts of myself that had nothing to do with money. My capacity for creative problem solving, my gift for teaching, my openness to new connections. The journey hadn't been smooth or direct, but it had led to this moment of profound contentment and anticipation. And it had all started with that decision to stand up for my dignity in an unconventional way. A reminder that sometimes the most effective response to being underestimated isn't quiet acquiescence, but creative, even dramatic, demonstration of capability. As Victor and I settled at our table overlooking the harbor, raising glasses to toast our new home and shared future, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey, even for the difficult beginning that had catalyzed so much positive change. Sometimes, it seemed, the most challenging circumstances led to the most unexpected blessings. And at 68, I was discovering that life still held abundant possibilities for growth, connection, and joy. All on my own terms, with the respect and dignity I had rightfully claimed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.